Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Wednesday, June 11th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. You go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner. It will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also download from that page a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through the worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get the maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. And we hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd appreciate you doing so. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if you're so inclined and you want to join us live, you can open up a browser window for Zoom and just enter in our Zoom meeting ID number, which is 853-2357-4173. That's 853-2357-4173. You can either call in through your phone or use a laptop or a tablet. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody chooses to do that, because the more you let us know how these things are landing for you, the easier it is for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service, and that is just so much easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. We have, I frequently like to remind people that whenever you have a comment or a question, please chime in, even if it seems like I'm in the middle of reading something or in the middle of a monologue, because our experience is that the more we get questions, the more there's a synergistic interaction between these people listening and people reading and people discussing and people questioning, the more likely we are to end up with what they call a highlight show, a show that people want to listen to over and over again, or that they find is very beneficial for them to stimulate their own exploration, their own questioning, their own insight and intuition. So, to return to reading the from the book by Christian Sundberg, titled A Walk in the Physical. We had left off with reading about experiences of the afterlife. And the question that he poses, that he's gotten posed to him, is the afterlife just one place or state? And Christian responds with, the afterlife, in quotes, quote, afterlife, close quotes, is staggeringly vast. It is not just one place or one state. In fact, there are many, many different reality systems. And what one can do in them varies significantly. The next question is, what is there to do in the afterlife? What activities can we perform in heaven? For instance, can we eat dinner? Can we go for walks? Can we enjoy a sunset? And Christian writes, yes, we can engage Earth-like environments where we can perform activities that are very, quote, normal, close quotes, for us here on Earth, including eating dinner, going for walks, or enjoying a sunset. However, there is far, far more available to do than the human portion of us might conceive of. We are powerful, creative beings, and so we can create and enjoy an extremely wide variety of very real environments and activities. There are huge numbers of ways we can express and enjoy our loving and creative natures with each other. In general, we might say that our, quote, activities, close quotes, are centered around serving others and the whole, expressing creativity, participating in the expansion of creativity and beauty, and experientially, quote, learning, close quotes, and evolving the quality of what we are. It's more than just activities, though. There are also states of being that are profoundly amazing, including states of joy and bliss that far transcend what we commonly experience while we're performing earthly activities. So what I'm getting out of this is, the last sentence he writes here is, there's a profound amount of freedom, and that freedom is exercised in multitudinous ways, many of which are not even imaginable by the human mind. And that's what I was going to tap into in that last paragraph. The bottom line is, we can't even begin to imagine. It's like Einstein said, we're like cats and dogs roaming through the Library of Congress. There's all this knowledge in all these books, and we have no way to access it. Because here we are living in this third dimensional reality with our five senses, and there's energies, all kinds of energies flowing all through us and around us that we can't be aware of because our senses just don't register them. I'm talking about radio waves and TV waves and X-rays and gamma rays and ultraviolet light and infrared and other energies we haven't even named. I mean, most people don't see the aura, and you need the Kirlian photography to get a picture of somebody's aura. But there are probably animals or other beings that see them as clearly as we see a hand or a foot. So, to think with our conscious logical mind and our human intellect, which has been programmed with language and programmed with, thought patterns and belief systems, to think with that and try to imagine that we can understand what life is going to be like after we drop the body is just plain silly. It's like a kindergarten kid imagining that they understand what it means to get an advanced degree in, a masterate level or a doctorate level or several doctorates. They can't even begin to imagine. They can say some words about it. They can repeat back some words that have been told to them about it. But to have any kind of personal understanding of the experience is just not possible. And so while it is part of our habit of thought that we want to question things and we want to understand them and pin them down, it's probably far more useful to just understand we can't get there from here. And we can't make the life in the non-physical or the spirit or consciousness conform to what we've been trained into in the physical realm and with our language and with our thought patterns and with our belief systems. I know that for most people, that's not a very satisfying answer because we've been trained to figure it out and to have an answer and to ask a question and demand an answer. And that's exactly why it's so useful to develop a practice like meditation or like the exercises that Dr. Michael Ryce will do in the intuitive learning uh, intensive that they do, because quite simply we have access to more ways of experiencing and knowing things than we are trained to do or that we have any practice in doing. And yet many people experience that if they enter into a training program for that, if they enter into the practice of these different exercises, they develop the ability. They expand their awareness of their abilities. So the next question that Christian decides to answer is, the question is, can you give examples of activities that are possible when we're not in the body? And Christian writes, there is far more possible than can be listed in earthly words. That being said, in my pre-birth memory, in the system that is, quote, above, close quotes, our own system, he writes, I recall doing what we might call traveling, talking, and playing with others. You might call it training or participating in complex creative endeavors. You might call it relaxing, participating in games of consciousness, and even just spending a great deal of time, quote, frolicking, close quotes. He writes, but there are actually far more possibilities than we might imagine while still human. For instance, many realities are immediately thought responsive, so you can do all sorts of fun things just by thinking. As a simple example of that, during an OBE, and I'm trying to remember what the acronym OBE stands for, some kind of experience. During an OBE I had a few years ago, I decided to figure out if I could taste in that reality. And I immediately created a rich peanut butter frosting. I was delighted to discover that not only did it taste and feel very real, but in fact, tasted even better than I expected. It was the perfect version of a peanut butter frosting. And then he puts in parentheses, though it lacked any, quote, surprise novelty, close quotes. He writes, anyway, in general, I don't feel the activities are what is most important. I think it is ultimately more a question of being than doing. That is, what we are is unto itself wonderful and full of joy. And then what we are expresses itself in a myriad of amazing ways and within a myriad of reality systems. So again, this is almost impossible for the human mind to register. How could it be that just being is deeply fulfilling without doing anything? He writes, we can even be entire other forms of existence that are purely blissful without even having to deal with objects or bodily actions. So again, from this realm, from the physical realm, we can't even imagine that. It just doesn't make sense. It's one of those things that seems like a complete paradox. When that happens, we like to remind people in shows like this to consider that when something seems like a paradox, it's because you're only able to see a tiny slice of the whole situation. And if you could see the whole situation, the paradox would be eliminated. The next question is, when we die, are the reality systems we can enter other objective places that are already inhabited by other beings? So again, the question is, do these places exist even before we die, or are we just creating them with our consciousness when we die? And however, I think the following qualification is pertinent. Reality is not primarily comprised of fundamental places where one can go and see things. Reality is not fundamentally comprised of places where we can go and see things. He puts in parentheses here that we learn that assumption here because it's how Earth seems to be, close parentheses. He writes, reality is primarily comprised of consciousness or spirit itself. Consciousness engages reality systems with various rule sets. Some, like our own, that are apparently shared places, and others that are extremely different and yet still real. With such a huge array of possibilities, it can be quite difficult or even impossible to explain a given experience as we speak of it from this earth side. That being said, there are other shared realities like our own that we can visit. In fact, that even happens while the physical body is alive. We can and do visit non-physical places, especially when our body is asleep. And often without a local part of us remembering it. He writes, but again, since, quote, places, close quotes, are not fundamentally real, I feel it is not an optimum habit to try to understand the higher realities as just places. That is, he writes in parentheses, it's not optimal, that is, to think in earth terms, close parentheses. We tend to immediately tie up the idea of an objective place with our definition of reality. And that's not a good assumption. Linear time, he writes in parentheses, linear causality, close parentheses, and singular location, and even the experience of separation of the self from the outside world, these are all assumptions we tend to believe in because of what we experience here on Earth. However, none of those are fundamentally necessary. In fact, the experience of stark separation that we're experiencing now is not only not fundamental, It's often perceived as one of the most highly alien and unusual experiences within the big picture. It's undertaken by only a relatively small number of very unique, and he writes in parentheses, and brave, close parentheses, souls. So I don't know about you, but in my mind, I quickly tire of questions like this because I don't hold those questions. They aren't burning in me. It's like you know I'm planning a trip here, leaving in a couple of days, and I get all kinds of questions from people. This morning, literally, someone was asking me, "What kind of foods do you think you're going to eat while you're there?" And aside from saying, "Well, since I'm going to be, in Seattle and it's on the ocean," and saying seafood, it doesn't really. That's not part of what I'm excited about or think about or plan for. And so, in a similar fashion, when people start talking about life after the body drops, I don't think in terms of, gee, will I finally get to ride in a souped up sports car, or will I finally get to live in a mansion, or will I finally get to fly, fly around without wings or a plane? I don't even think like that. I have thoughts or imaginings about uh, expanding awareness, or about being able to extend loving energies differently, or about um, experience outside of the physical realm, which for me just becomes a big question mark instead of something I try to describe or imagine. And because we are so limited here in terms of what we can think, because of what's been programmed into us, and how we can communicate our experiences because of the limitations of our language, I find it's more interesting and or rewarding to simply engage practices that bring me a deeper peace or a more expansive experience in the moment now. And perhaps some of that comes from the fact that I was raised as a Catholic, kindergarten, grade school, high school, and college, and there was such a heavy focus on uh, preparing for the afterlife, or hoping for the afterlife, or praying for the afterlife, or saving up your indulgences so that you can buy your way out of purgatory, or whatever kind of silliness they were talking about back then. And there was a lot of it. So I'm not, ever since I decided to put aside those rigid dogmatic teachings and start to explore other expansive spiritual works and meditation, I haven't worried so much about what it's going to be like after I die. I've focused more of my conscious energy and activities on trying to make this present moment experience as lovely as I can. So we have plenty of time for questions and comments. We had our support group last night, and we listened to um, a 1 hour presentation by Dr. Michael Ryce titled, "Why is this happening to me again?" And it's clearly something that was happening near the early pandemic restrictions, because it was a video presentation, and the audience was all on video in a Zoom call or something similar to a Zoom call. And um, and we had discussion. We didn't have anybody do a worksheet last night, but we had some people talking about different issues that had gotten triggered for them. And somebody brought up that one of their favorite things to listen to is my reading of The Way of Mastery with commentary, which is available on the mindshiftersacademy.org website. And I think that particular series was done in 2022 and 2023. I'm not remembering it exactly. And then last night I got an email from Christian Sundberg, and he apologizes that he will not be available on August 1st, and we're tentatively rescheduling. I'm waiting for his confirmation to reschedule for August 8th. So instead of Friday, August 1st, it'll be a week later that he'll join us on the Mind Shifters Radio at the 11 o'clock time slot Central Time. And I will give updates if that changes. He explained that there was a change in his family's summer travel plans, and that's why there's a need to adjust his agreed meeting for the Mind Shifters Radio. So I'm looking for the mindshiftersacademy.org website, and I'm looking up I have Mastery on Mind Shifters Radio with commentary. It's one page that's loaded with all kinds of audio files. So if you're doing it on a mobile device, it's probably going to load slowly. If you don't have a good Wi-Fi, it may not load at all. And one of the projects that I have a plan for is to separate that out into either the different lessons or different time frames so that it's fewer files per page. So that it's more easily accessible. But that was happening in 2022. And then the beginning of in 2023, end of 23 and 24, we read all the way through the book again, but I didn't keep up with all the editing and uploading files. So just making that offering that's 2 people now within 1 week who've told me that their favorite thing to listen to from the old files is The Way of Mastery reading with commentary. And it's available absolutely free on the mindshiftersacademy.org website, and we encourage you to take advantage of it and chime in with responses. So the next question, since nobody's got a hand up or is unmuting themselves, the next question that Christian goes to answer is, near-death experiencers mention things that are common to earthly experience, things like language, clothing, etc. These things are human creations, and they're constructs of society, so I wouldn't expect to find them on the other side. How could things that are based on our human experience exist in the world beyond? That is, why are there reports of the afterlife having earthly objects in it, like bodies, clothes, and green grass? Christian writes, consciousness is what is real, not things. And then consciousness, when it incarnates as a human personality, it learns to understand all of reality from the learned earthly perspective. While there are other reality systems that are, quote, above, close quotes, our own, where the, quote, thought objects, close quotes, of all the participants of Earth are quite real and can be experienced in new environments. Also, the larger system uses what you might call an experience language of the individual to interact with them. Since that is what we know, and that's how we perceive things here, it makes sense that someone trying to connect with us would use a language or a set of experiences or a set of images that we would know and understand. He writes, truly, reality does transcend all the relative objects of Earth. However, to the local portion of the self that knows nothing else, which is available immediately after the body is dropped, earthly contexts are most appropriate, and they're most comforting, and they're most enjoyable. Meanwhile, many near-death experiencers do experience transcendent states. However, they typically have a very difficult time describing those states in words, since the words we would use are the words that come from our world and our language and our limitations of physical time and space. The next question he goes to answer is, if we're all one and all connected, will I lose my individuality when I die? And Christian writes, there are many states of being available to be experienced. But no, we do not lose our individuality when we die. Our individuality is precious and preserved. In general, we will be simultaneously aware of both our individuality and our oneness with all things. We can go to various extremes across that spectrum, but the precious individuality is never lost. Again, here's a paradox. It just doesn't seem possible. How can it be that I have my individuality and I'm aware that I'm connected to everything? There's a story about the soul or the man that was made out of salt, and he wanted to experience the ocean. And so he was advised, just go down and walk into the ocean. But as he went down near the water and dipped his toe in the water, his toe disappeared. It dissolved because he's made of salt. And he recoiled and said, wait a minute, I don't want to know the ocean if I lose myself. A question and answer like this says, you only think you're losing yourself because you have such a limited perspective about what is possible. And then the next question is, I've often wondered, if you meet your friends and relatives in the afterlife and spend eternity with them, what about all their friends and relatives and their friends and relatives? You couldn't spend all your time with the people you know if they're spending time with the people they know. So do we exist in all places at the same time? Again, this is one of those, I'm beating my head against a brick wall with these kinds of questions because I'm assuming after I drop the bomb, I'm going to be in a place that has the same kinds of rules of physics, of linear time, and about how two objects can't occupy the same space in the same time frame, etc. Christian's answer here is, when we consider higher realms from within our local constraints, intellect can come to all sorts of weird, and he calls this, quote, duality rules-based conclusions, close. Realms, things can seem very confusing and likely contrary. He writes, we are ultimately all one. Even as individuality is preserved. And there is a very, very wide variety of ways in which we may spend what we call our time. Quote, time, close quotes. So there's this wide range of ways we might spend our time, even with individuals or with what you call the all. Or as individuals who know we are one with all. Those relationships are not like they are here on Earth. Because on Earth, they are bound by physical, biological, and space-time constraints. Our, quote, true, close quotes, relationships are enjoyed with far less limitation when we're no longer in the body. I just got the image of water that either comes to a boil or evaporates, and then it turns to vapor or steam, and then it dissipates. But it didn't die, it's not gone, it's just in a different form. And it's less constrained, so it's more pervasive, and it's touching or experiencing far more than it was experiencing when it was just in the liquid form. The next question that's posed is, are there any instances where someone is bored in heaven because all the things they like aren't available there, and the only things they can do are things that don't interest them? I'm shaking my head. If you're watching the screen, you see me shaking my head. I mean, it's questions like this that just, I understand why they're asked, but I just think, you know, the fundamental premise that's been reported so often about how the rules of linear time and physicality do not apply in the non-physical realm. And questions like this seem to ignore that kind of answer that's been given so many times. Christian writes, one is not truly made happy by the things one likes. In other words, it's all these deep teachings like from Michael Singer and the Buddhist teachings and Byron Katie's work, the whole idea of, you just flashed on Abraham saying, your most important creation in each moment is your emotion in that moment. Your emotion in any moment is not created by the things around you. It's an inside job. And that's what Christian begins with his answer here. He says, one is truly not ever truly made happy by the things one likes, things outside of oneself. One is made happy by the true knowing, experiencing, and expressing of one's own being. So I just flashed on a whole series of thoughts about boredom. And again, I think the entire experience that we call boredom can only happen, excuse me, can only happen here in the physical realm because we're so focused on external things and because we aren't willing to get to know and fully express our true being. And Christian brings it home right here, and he says, a person is made happy, a consciousness has happiness from true knowing, experiencing, and expressing of their own being. And then he writes in parentheses, knowing and or expressing the connectedness, the freedom, the creativity, and the love of one's being, which includes all others. Close parentheses. He writes, meanwhile, many heavenly environments are thought responsive, and all manner of, quote, things, close quotes, or forms, if you will, become available for enjoyment. Yet there is a certain something that only the call of real challenge provides. So many people, many consciousness, many entities return to the physical to be re-engaged in new ways within a universe of constraints like ours here in the physical realm. They do this so as to expand the nature of their being through this manifest experience, through going through different experiences. Why do people climb a mountain? Because it's there. They do it for the experience. The next question is, I've read that a person who was restless in this earth life will probably remain the same in the afterlife. Do we not get peace when we die? Christian responds by saying, peace is native or fundamental to capital B being. A given level of the self, though, may have certain patterns that lead it through various manifest experiences, whether in this reality or others. With death, the constraints of biology are always relinquished, and much of our current hardship is in those constraints. It is possible that fear can continue to lead the individual into certain manifest experiences for a time, perhaps even a long time. However, one way or the other, ultimately, all people always return to the love and joy that is their true being, with a capital B. I just flashed on the Rumi quote. If you're looking around you and everything seems dark, look again, you may be the light. You know, if you're in a situation and you are generating the experience we call boredom because you're looking outside of yourself or thinking, gee, what else is there to do? You might want to slow down and turn inside yourself and recognize there is such an expansive, creative, blissful experience happening in you that there's no need to generate boredom. The next question he's responding to is, as we age, we begin to develop mental illnesses of all sorts. When we pass over, will these mental illnesses affect us on the other side? Christian writes, having a body is like wearing a biological constraint set. When the biology dies, the biological restraints vanish with it. When the body dies, all is healed, with an exclamation point. From my PBE, and I'm going to assume that's pre-birth experience, he writes, I remember reviewing the precious, wonderful quality that a certain spirit had developed as a result of experiencing a long neurodegenerative disease as a human. So in his pre-birth experience, he had an interaction with another entity, another consciousness. And in that interaction, he perceived a wonderful quality in that other consciousness or spirit. That quality was developed as the result of that spirit coming into the physical realm and experiencing a long neurodegenerative disease as a human being. In other words, the rigors of mental illness or other neurological challenge are actually an amazing opportunity for the spirit. He writes, I'm struggling for how to say this, but you might say that the spirit, quote, refines, close quotes, the way it interacts with and experiences reality. In parentheses, he writes, "This is extremely hard to describe from here, and I acknowledge that it can be a very hard pill to swallow from the human ego's perspective. It can be seen from that perspective that the rigorous challenges of living in a deteriorating body or mind, though extremely challenging at the time, are actually more than just worth the difficulty." And some might say it's why some people come and choose to have a physical experience. That the real payoff to the physical experience isn't just getting to eat your favorite fresh seafood when you're visiting the ocean, or getting to eat all of the luscious chocolatey sweets that you crave, but that the real payoff for the spirit, for the consciousness, from coming into the physical is this list of things that we call the aches and pains. It's the list of the struggles and the constraints. Think about it this way. Why do people who are healthy and physically fit, why do they decide to do a marathon or a triathlon or an Ironman marathon triathlon, or run 100 miles without stopping? Why are they doing that? Why are these people trying to climb Kilimanjaro and Mount Everest, and where they know people have died, and they know that there's a risk of frostbite, and they know there's a risk that they will be injured or killed? Why do people do that? Here in the physical realm, people do that. So it isn't that big a stretch to imagine that someone might be in the non-physical realm in pure spirit and say, I want an experience I can't have unless I take on a body. And I want the challenge of being able to stay loving or expand my capacity for extending love in more and more challenging circumstances. If you just slow down and think about it, it isn't that bizarre. It's part of this, the essence of us as people who, even in the physical realm, we've got relative comfort and climate controlled rooms, and we're physically fit in a comfortable body, and we go out on some trek across the Yukon, or the Tour de France bicycle tour, or the Race Across America bicycle tour, and we push our bodies, maybe not to the limit. Most of us don't push our bodies all the way to the limit, but some people do on a regular basis, and they just keep pushing to see how far they can go. And it causes great physical discomfort, and it causes mental, emotional stress, but it doesn't stop. People keep doing it. And not too long after they recover from their last challenge, they'll start to get the itch to go make another sojourn or adventure. So the fact of the matter is, what most of us are experiencing as extraordinarily challenging and painful and debilitating and frustrating here in the physical realm, it's literally those aspects of existence that many people come here for. Not because they want to experience that, but because they want to grow through that experience. Right? The people who go out to run a triathlon don't go out to do it because they want to have their muscles searing with pain. They wish they could do it and not have the searing pain. But because of the physical constraint set, they realize there is no way to have that full experience of a marathon without having the physical discomfort. So they train to minimize the physical discomfort, but they know that's not possible to eliminate it completely. And they experience growth because they've challenged themselves. So, Sally, did you intentionally unmute this time?
I did. I did. I'm having a walk in the physical and a walk in the woods. So I'm in my happy place. But I had a comment regarding something you said just a little while back. You said, when you walk into a space and you notice there's darkness, maybe you are the light that is there, that maybe that's for you. And last night in class, I wanted to make a comment. There was a gal that came on and she was kind of resistant to the AA meetings. And she said that it felt like there was nothing there for her and that, or something, I'm rewording, but that there wasn't the kind of greeting she was hoping for. And I wanted to make the comment that sometimes it isn't what you get from any encounter, it's what you bring. And it's been a mantra in my head for a very long time. It's like that which is missing from any situation is that which I have not given. I think that's transcribed from the Course. And I also wanted to say that I love this Christian Sundberg guy. I would love to know him. And I just really enjoy both Way of Mastery and Walk in the Physical. It's just singing my song right now, and I'm grateful. That's it.
All right, glad to hear it. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they mentioned that they really like listening to the Way of Mastery with the commentary files
Yeah.
from the mindshiftersacademy.org website, but they started to apologize because they have to repeat it so often because they have to stop and back up and repeat. And what was that? And what did? And I had to tell them, look, the only reason those files are there on that website is because I had the same experience. When I read that first lesson of the Way of Mastery, I read it dozens of times before I felt like it was okay to move on to the second lesson.
Yes.
And I read the second lesson dozens of times before I felt prompted to move on to the third. And it was probably at about the third lesson that I realized I wanted these first three lessons in my life more often. So I decided to record them on my computer and burn them onto CDs so I could be playing them as I drove. And for months, I was just listening over and over again to those first three lessons.
Beautiful.
It was so stirring. It was such a different perspective than I'd had up until that point in my life, that it was the mechanism of repetition that allowed me to get more and more out of it.
Yep. I love it. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. Enjoy your walk. Thank you for unmuting intentionally this time and commenting. I'll
Thank
go ahead
you.
and mute you so you can listen to whatever's left. We only have a few minutes left, so if anybody else has a question or a comment, please unmute yourself and speak up now. We've got about maybe 5 minutes before I should close out. I was thinking about the words that Sally just said about I love this Christian person, and of course we don't know this Christian person. So basically, what she's saying is, I love what's getting resonated in me as I listen to the book he's written, and it's it's just like some of these other teachings that we were talking about in the Q and A's from this book, A Walk in the Physical, that that echo the teaching from the Way of Mastery, where it says it takes one to know one. And in the Way of Mastery, that lesson that it takes one to know one, he acknowledges that he's echoing a childhood, a playground rhyme or a comeback to an insult. And yet he says there's the deep wisdom in this that many deep spiritual teachings understand. And the Way of Mastery says in a number of places, you could not acknowledge that this is a deep, powerful teaching unless the essence of that teaching was alive within you. That you've begun to have some of these deep spiritual revelations, that there's literally a part in you that's the same as what's in Yeshua and everybody else that you interact with. And it's that energy resonating that provides what you experience as an attraction to the person, an attraction to the teaching, etc. Words really don't suffice here. They really can't encompass this completely. So imagine that there's an exercise available in this observation for any one of us. At any time we are out and about and we are seeing something in nature, whether it's a horse prancing across a field or it's that beautiful full moon that was there last night. Yeah, I got one of the best pictures uh, I've ever been able to take of that full moon last night. Due only to the fact that the camera I have now has a, a pre-setting in it that says moon. And so it's all computerized to set the aperture and the exposure rate, and it's got the it's got a stabilization factor. It's got a digital stabilization factor. And when people look at a picture like that and they go, oh, well, the only reason they can have that kind of an experience is because there's that kind of beauty inside the person. And it's resonating when you have the awe experience, when you have this recognition of deep beauty in another person or in nature. It's only possible because that's literally your true nature. And so there's an exercise that you can have. Guy Finley does this routinely when he's got people visiting his Life of Learning Center. He sends them out for a walk and says, here's an exercise on your walk. Pay attention to anything that catches your interest and recognize that there has to be that same kind of vibratory aliveness or beauty or essence within you, or you wouldn't be attracted to that. So I'll leave us with that for now. Again, the reminder that there will not be a support group meeting tomorrow night or next Tuesday or Thursday. I will be here for a radio show tomorrow at 11 Central, but I will not be here Friday or all next week or Monday the 23rd. I'll be returning on the 24th. So I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Thanks for listening. Blessings.